Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Virtua Talks News with myself, Harry Cole from the Communications team, and Leon Waters from the content team. Say hi,
Oh,
Leon.
hey guys, how's it going? All good?
Right. So, we've had another busy period with a lot of interesting news stories. So, Leon and I had a lot to choose from. But we'd like to start by talking about a story that we saw on the BBC, which is billions being spent in the metaverse land grab. So, we're at a time where land in the metaverse is definitely a topic of interest for the news. The likes of Sandbox, Decentraland, they've been selling a lot of land for a long time. We've obviously, as Virtua, have entered the space through a successful launch of Cardano Island, and now we've got Monster Zone coming up. Leon, what are your thoughts at the moment around metaverse and the value of virtual digital property?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for companies and business, especially, which is the focus of that article, like a lot of it is to do with companies investing in the metaverse in the sense of buying land within the metaverse so they can have their flagship locations, they can have stores, they can have places to showcase their business and what they do. So, I think for companies and business, like if you have a presence in the metaverse, that's going to be really important because, and it already kind of is, because you have different platforms which are proto metaverse, but they're not fully formed metaverses yet. But getting in early to that kind of stuff means that you're staying ahead of the game and you're not trying to catch up when it's too late. And numbers really get like a lot of media attention, but the story is a lot bigger than just like a price tag or anything like that. And again, with like investments, numbers can go up and down. So they may be at a certain point in a particular time, they may go up, they may go down, whatever. It's not really like the main crux of the issue or the main like big topic within it, because there's a deeper story behind that. So it's down to companies really whether they think it's worth the money or not, but it's really down to business opportunities and not wanting to be left behind. Because we've seen over the last 25 years, like my background's in the music industry, I've seen what happens when companies and brands and businesses ignore technology or they fight against it, because all these record labels and all these different companies fought against the internet as hard as they possibly could. And they're still doing it to an extent. And it's cost them a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of just wasted opportunities and destroyed the industry, cut it in half at one point. So we've seen over that last 25 years what happens when companies and brands try and fight progress and they fight change. And a lot of them disappear, they get forgotten about. The music industry got cut in half to its total value, to the point where when we had the last few years and all the COVID stuff, like the industry got devastated because it didn't have any revenue to fall back on without live music. And the reason for that was because they fought against progress and change during the internet, the internet's emergence. So you get new companies and new competitors who are going to come through and they're going to see that change coming and they're going to adapt to it. They're going to keep growing. They're going to profit from it. And anyone who's not doing that gets left behind. Or if they try and fight against it, then they're even further behind. So yeah, we had like the internet, we've had social media, had smartphones, and now Web3, and these are massive game changers, but people don't want to miss the boat. So sometimes large numbers are involved in that, like the cost of actually getting involved, to especially for big brands, because they have massive infrastructure existing already within their business that they have to kind of like integrate all these things into. So it's going to cost them some money to kind of do that. But yeah, it's just kind of how it is. And I think behind the numbers, there's a much deeper, much more interesting story. Like I think that's kind of what we got. And within Virtua as well, we have Cardano Islands. We have our own partnerships with various brands and companies. Eventually, we're going to have category islands on Virtua Prime. That's something we kind of like put public, and there's going to be a lot of different categories for various metaverse environments and anything like sports, music, movies, all kinds of things like that. So we do have like partnerships lined up for that. We have already got partnerships anyway. And we're having these things in the metaverse environment on Cardano Islands, and we've got the Monster Zone coming up as well. So there's new things happening with that. Like we've got a lot of really cool stuff coming up with that. And that's on Virtua Islands, which is a separate island as well. So the Monster Zone is a zone on Virtua Island. It's in the top left corner. So but in general, like we're building in a bear market, which is the best thing to do in a bear market, really. And we're finding a lot of support and a lot of interest, even though the market isn't in the best position right now. So there's a lot of really positive things going on with that, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to land in the metaverse, one thing I have picked up myself through working in crypto is go out there and do your research. You know, there isn't a kind of holy grail. There isn't one individual or business or organization that has all the answers about what is suitable for each business, for each individual. I think with land in the metaverse, it's very accessible. You know, you can pick things up for hundreds of dollars or less in some cases, and experiment and, you know, see what works for you, see what the perks are, see what the project's all about. And you know, there's so many different businesses now coming into the space. It will be interesting to see what they get out of it. But I think it's, as you were saying, it's important to go in, find out about it, do the research, give it a try, and be ready, because this is something that's going to revolutionize a lot of industries, a lot of businesses. And you're not going to go wrong by knowing as much about it as you possibly can before, you know, mass adoption comes in.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you said it all, I think. Yeah, I disagree with that. Yeah, yeah, that's just correct. That's just, yeah, exactly right.
And so next up, we've got an angle that you've spotted.
Yeah, well, we had another thing as well with the mobile app, which is been really, really interesting because you can use the mobile app as like an NFT marketplace app at the moment. So you can use it for keeping up to date with all our NFT drops. But it's going to develop over time. It's going to develop over time into a complete kind of metaverse platform, essentially, with a lot of different functions. But not all of the features are on the app right now. They're going to be developing. So out of all the features on the app at the moment, though, I really love the augmented reality feature, because last week we had the Cardano Summit here in London, and that was really amazing. But I was showing a lot of people the AR feature on the app, and showing them like Godzilla in AR, showing them Godzilla in the room, whatever. And it was really, really cool. And people were really like blown away by it. And they really loved that. So you can see all these 3D models as they would look in the real world. And I've even taken like some pictures of Godzilla next to Big Ben. It's a landmark here in London. And also we have a lot of big plans for the app in the future as well. So we'll have a lot of features which will bring you into the metaverse. I can kind of say that so far. But yeah, in terms of the other topic as well, we also have like a report from a research company saying that the metaverse will pump $1.4 trillion a year into Asia's GDP. So that was actually an article by CNBC, and there's actually some really interesting stats, which I didn't know previously, actually. So 60% of the world's younger generations, like the youth of the world, actually live in Asia, 60%. So it's a massive market for new tech and Web3 and gaming. 1.3 billion mobile gamers in Asia as well. The tech industry, everyone knows, is huge in Asia, not just for marketing, but for manufacturing, but also for like tech development and innovation as well. So sometimes it can be easy to like focus on Western countries like the US and the UK, and Western economies like Europe and the US. I think that that's kind of the be all and end all, and that's like the most important thing in Web3. But the rest of the world's out there too. And Web3 and blockchain tech is global and international. It's kind of like breaking the borders between countries, and people kind of forget that sometimes. But the opportunities that are out there can be really game changing, and it's a really exciting area to look at. And seeing how the metaverse and Web3 develop in Asia specifically will be really interesting, because those guys are already like actually ahead of us in many ways as well.
Absolutely. I think you know, there's so many technology companies, as you say, such as Samsung, LG, Sony, which I think we're going to mention again in a moment, that are entering and, you know, prepared to really sort of lead the space. Especially, you know, of course, China has such a you know, foothold in technology at this time. I think Jawad, our CEO, co-founder, he's speaking at an Asian event this week called Metaverse Carnival, which is taking place from tomorrow, which is really exciting because it's great that, as you say, you know, the metaverse is for everyone. We're creating virtual digital spaces that don't have the confines of that you have with physical spaces, which is, you know, you can go and meet someone in China in the metaverse in, you know, just as quickly as you and I could take part in this call. And that just shows, you know, one of the other kind of possibilities within the space is that lack of physical boundaries. Of course, there's going to be language barriers, but being able to interact with other people in the space is really exciting, and it's great that that region is embracing the metaverse just as Europe is, and other parts of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, you're saying it all. Yeah, I think with the language barrier, I mean, like translation tech is getting a lot better as well. So I think eventually we'll be able to be in immersive environments with people from all around the world, and they'll speak or type in their own language, and we'll be able to kind of understand and interpret that through various like AI translation technologies, which are being developed now. And AI kind of like language tech is improving quite a lot. Yeah, so I think that even that eventually will kind of like cease to be so much of a barrier, and then we can interact more with people from all over the world. It'd be really cool.
Wow, that would be absolutely incredible. And that nicely leads on to our next story, which is trademarks filed for NFTs, metaverse, and cryptocurrency soared to new levels in 2022. And that was a Cointelegraph article all about trademarks. Two brands that got a shout out in there were Sony, and the other one was Rolex. So, I think it just demonstrates clearly that the metaverse is still being built. It's probably the word of 2022. I think they're doing a survey into what the word of 2022 should be at the moment, and metaverse is in the shortlist. I think it will probably win because this year has been all about metaverse. But these trademarks show other players, other businesses, people like Rolex and Sony who are long established and from different areas moving into the space and seeing the value there. Do you think we'll see more people coming in? And does that mean 2023 might even be more metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar to the Metaverse Land article in the sense that it involves like companies coming into Web3. But I think it's really cool that brands and companies are putting a lot of effort into preparing to enter Web3, even if they haven't already, because like markets do move in cycles, and at some point in the future, things will begin to improve. And every single time there's a sentiment change in crypto or Web3, the wider like media, especially financial media, will jump on it and then really kind of like go with the flow of whatever the sentiment is at the time. So there's actually a website called 99 Bitcoins, which has a section called Bitcoin obituaries, and Bitcoin's died almost like 500 times or something, because like literally every time there's every time the Bitcoin price goes down slightly, somebody in the media will then go, oh, Bitcoin's dead, and they'll be like writing these articles, and then it'll go back up, and they're like, oh my God, Bitcoin to the moon, oh, this is the time to get in. And like, it's kind of ridiculous because like obviously not financial advice, but the idea of this stuff is to like buy low and sell high. It's not to do it the other way around. But sentiment in the media is the opposite of that. Like when things are really low, they're saying, oh, it's going to go to 10K, it's going to go to zero, it's worthless. And then when Bitcoin last year was at like whatever it was, like 69K, everyone was like, oh my God, it's the future of money. And now it's 16K again. And like people are like, well, it's going to go to zero again. So these things move in cycles. That's kind of the point. And things will improve in the future, and then they'll go down again, they'll go up again. And hopefully over time, if you look at it on a log chart, a logarithmic chart, then you'll see things going up ideally. But people can be very short-sighted, and that means they miss out on opportunities. And it's good to see that these companies are not taking that approach. They're not really listening to like the hype or the doom saying or anything else like that. They're actually looking at it from a more objective point of view of, do we want to miss out on this opportunity in the future? Do we want to take advantage of this or not? Do we want to be prepared to do this? Because maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. Ultimately, it's a speculative thing, as the entire world is right now. The entire state of the world right now is speculative, but things can go right. They can go the way you expect or not, but companies are preparing for it. So that's another point. And we have a lot of precedents now for how technology can change the world, and you can't ignore change, can't ignore progress. Otherwise, you're going to end up with problems like the music industry did, like I said earlier. Yeah, and you just have to prepare for what's coming, and you can't have a very fixed view of technology, which is something I've kind of like mentioned a few times through our videos as well. A lot of people have like a particular fixed opinion on crypto or NFTs or blockchain or whatever, and you can't have that, even if you're in the industry or you're outside of it, no matter what your position is, you can't have a fixed view of it and say, this is good, this is bad, this is the thing, and this is my opinion of it forever. And this is how it's always going to be, because it's always evolving. And I used the example previously of the Ethereum merge and the effect on the network's carbon footprint, and on Polygon as well, which we use. It's like a 99% reduction in carbon emissions. So things like that, like really just change the game overnight. In that case, it was just literally just like a snap of the fingers and you're in a new era. So yeah, you can't have that fixed view. And I think all these trademark filings really like demonstrate that preparation. It's positive for the Web3 space because it's showing that people are taking a more fluid and kind of like long-term view of these things, and not just listening to the sentiment at the time and the media rolling along with that sentiment at the time, which will change every 5 seconds depending on whether Bitcoin goes up or down in price.
Absolutely. I think we've all heard the phrase crypto is dead, mentioned many times on different forums. And it sounds hilarious that someone's tracking the obituaries of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. I think one thing, that you touched on there as well is, is this evidence of the market maturing? You will often, with any new technology, you'll get players entering the space, especially new players, such as OpenSea, people like that, companies that didn't exist before, or as far as I know, in the, well, especially in the size and scale they do now, that come into the space. But then as the market matures, you get the established players move into the space as the market becomes less volatile, becomes more, they can see a timeline, they can see where they will find a space within the metaverse. So I think it's a sign of the space maturing. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know a lot of people in in kind of like my social space who are very into finance and technology and Web3 and fintech. And so a few years ago, there was really a big debate as to whether or not all this stuff was going to get banned or it was going to get destroyed or whatever. And I think now it's been through enough cycles and enough stages of evolution for people to realize that it's not just going to disappear overnight now. And governments and companies and all kinds of different institutions, banks and everything else, even countries like El Salvador, all these companies are now kind of adopting all these institutions, and kind of really long-term kind of legacy institutions are now kind of moving into the space and adopting it. So when that's happening, that's a sign that things are going to be here to stay. And even though things may go up and down and different things can happen, whether it's positive or negative, and price can go up and down, whatever, numbers do whatever, it's still going to be around and kind of be consistently around in that time. So yeah, I think that's kind of a really big thing for that.
Absolutely. Next up, we've got an angle that you spotted to do with the UK government.
Yeah, so actually, the title for this one was the UK government to examine pros and cons of blockchain tech and NFTs. So we've had a bit of a tumultuous time politically in the UK for the last few months with change to prime ministers, and the current one we have, Rishi Sunak, is very pro crypto and pro Web3, which is bullish for the space, obviously. And he was actually Chancellor of the Exchequer prior to being Prime Minister, and he did want the Royal Mint to create a kind of commemorative NFT. So a really key part of the UK's financial system is actually going to create its own NFT. That's kind of how pro crypto our kind of PM is. So there's a lot of work happening in government around blockchain tech and also ways to apply it. So that's crypto and NFTs. We do also have a central bank digital currency project, which is very controversial because CBDCs are basically programmable money, and it's not really what crypto is about. It's not the same as crypto. It's kind of a government-controlled, blockchain-enabled technology. But there's a lot of kind of concern around privacy and surveillance, government's taking control of your funds and saying, okay, you can spend your money on this, but not this. You can put your money here, you can't put it here. You can do certain things, but you can't do other things. So that's been kind of controversial, but then at the same time, we do also have quite good crypto tax laws and things like that. And the general attitude of the government towards the space is not hostile anyway. At the very least, it's neutral right now, neutral kind of positive. So it's good for the space. And I think the other thing that we've kind of mentioned previously in different videos is that regulation is going to come at some point across the world in different forms. And it's going to be part of mass adoption. It's going to be inevitable. And so a case of hoping that lawmakers get to a point where they do understand and appreciate the value in Web3, hoping that they get to a point where they can protect innovation and give people freedom to make their own choices, which is a big part of what this whole thing is about, the metaverse and everything else. It's not about one centralized entity telling you what to do. It's about you have control over your things and you have sovereignty as a kind of sovereign individual, if you like. And you kind of have to be, therefore, more responsible in yourself as you kind of operate within that space. So education is, in my opinion, more important or equally important as regulation, because people need to be able to take responsibility. And you can't just have someone saying you can do this and you can't do that because that's the law and that's it. You kind of have to understand why that's happening, because we kind of understand those things with basic laws that we do now, but Web3 is a technology and a kind of like cultural, societal shift. You kind of need to understand what it's about in order to kind of understand why things might be regulated a particular way and why you should do certain things. And we'll get onto this point in a second as well, but like cybersecurity and risk management, and being able to do your own research and verify that things are legit, protecting yourself from bad actors and all the rest of it. You do need to be able to do those things. You have to be educated to use online tools like Google to be able to actually like do your own research and find out what's legit and what's not, and be able to kind of like filter out the stuff that's bad. Because if we don't do that and there's a lack of education, then regulation doesn't really help, because we have regulation now against like email fraud and whatever else, like email, text messaging, phone calls. All these technologies enable people to scam people. Web3 is no different in that respect. It's another thing that can be used by bad actors. So even though those things are illegal, you still need, if you get a text message from like your local kind of like COVID testing thing saying, "Oh, text this number and give us your bank details so we can check that you're COVID, you're COVID negative," or something like that, then if you reply to that text and you give them your details, then you're screwed. It could be like your identity gone or something. So education is really important, as important as regulation, I think.
Absolutely.
And again, it's part of mass adoption. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think you're right. It's encouraging for the space, and it's good that, a moment ago we're talking about crypto is dead, but in reality it's probably just going to continue to go through different stages of evolution, and people being digital currency savvy is something that future generations will just take as normal. If we see currency going more digital and governments understanding that as that will be the future, that is a possibility, that is something that they need to consider alongside existing fiat currencies, it's a positive for the space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just kind of having a balanced view of it and not being, yeah. I think it's more about like taking that middle road opinion, that middle road view, and kind of looking at the positive and negative things versus trying to say, "Oh, this is bad" or "this is good" in like a kind of absolute sense. Yeah.
Excellent. So next on our list, this is one that we just could not talk about because it's obviously dominated this space for the last few weeks, and that's crypto exchange FTX going down. This was a story in The Guardian. Crypto exchange FTX expects to have more than 1 million creditors. So as we discussed prior to the call, when we're not here to revel in a platform going down, it's definitely not something that we would have hoped for, or we know a lot of individuals and businesses will be affected by FTX going down, and it's a real shame. But what we wanted to discuss was, what does this mean for the industry? And Leon, you actually had some really good points around, being prepared for this sort of thing happening in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the FTX thing is kind of a difficult subject to kind of like address in the Web3 space, because it kind of like highlights a particular vulnerability, which specifically is centralized exchanges, and also how people approach the way that they kind of store and manage their funds in NFTs and everything in the Web3 blockchain kind of world. So obviously FTX was really, really horrible, and there's been this massive, massive explosion of kind of like negative sentiment, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. Some people lost everything in some cases, and it's been really, really bad. I know a number of people who've been directly affected by that, and also the fallout of it. So it's like there's no way to kind of like work around the fact that that's a negative. But at the same time, it wasn't the customer's fault that it happened, but there are kind of like things that you can do in hindsight to kind of look at it and try and see what lessons you can learn from it kind of personally, as someone who kind of operates within that space, someone who has cryptocurrency, or someone who has a crypto wallet at least, someone who's interested in the space, or someone who has NFTs and the rest of it. Risk management and cybersecurity, personal cybersecurity especially, if you're holding any kind of crypto assets, or you're trading, or you're doing anything else. The thing with Web3 is you are your own bank and you're a sovereign individual. These things are not regulated by, like, say, the FCA in the UK, or regulators anywhere else. Like they're not protected. If you lose your funds, then you've lost your funds. You can't go to anyone and say, oh, no, an insurance company or whatever, and say, oh, well, I've lost my money through my credit card getting stolen. Can I get my money back? Like it's not the same thing. Some companies like Coinbase will have like hack insurance essentially, or like a kind of like hack guarantee, where if they get hacked or whatever, then they'll give you a certain amount of your funds back. Some exchanges and some companies do have those things, and again, that's down to research, and that's down to like looking at who offers what, and then making a decision about where to store your stuff. But because you are your own bank, you kind of need to think in terms of how do you kind of like keep your things actually secure? Because again, if you lose your funds and you lose your NFTs, you can't get them back. If you send crypto or an NFT to the wrong blockchain address, the wrong wallet address, you get one character wrong in a wallet address when you're sending something somewhere else, you could lose it forever, and then you can't get it back. People do things like they send cryptocurrencies, crypto into like smart contracts, which are just the wrong contract, or they send things into a contract the wrong way around, and then it gets trapped. And even the people who have the smart contract can't go into the code and change it because it's on the blockchain and it's immutable. You can't reverse it. So, I mean, there's some financial advice, but like when you have these different things and you're in the space, then you don't want to rely on just one storage location, in my opinion. You want to kind of have multiple wallets. And if you do any kind of trading or any kind of like anything Web3 personally, I would say it's best to have your funds on multiple exchanges, multiple wallets, not just in one place. And then that way, if one exchange goes down, whichever one it is, or there's a problem with the wallet, like sometimes certain types of wallets have security issues, you don't have to worry about losing everything in that case. You just have part of your funds at the very least that are kind of like at risk from that. So with FTX, for instance, a lot of people had their funds in FTX or all in BlockFi, for instance, and there are all these different products out there with like DeFi and centralized finance, which are offering very high yields. That was another thing which we had recently with things like Luna and Celsius and all these other companies. And again, it's not like say I told you so or anything else, because nobody can see these things coming. But a lot of people kind of like got pulled in by the promise of high yields on different investments, or just the promise of like, oh, we're like the number one company and you've got to have all your stuff with us. And so a lot of people did that, and then they put all their eggs in one basket basically. And then FTX crash happened, or things like the Luna crash happened a while ago, and people can lose everything in those circumstances because they decide this is the one thing that I want to put my money in. And if you do that, then it's not like having a bank account where you can have one bank account, and if you lose your money from it, then you go to the bank and you say, can I get it back? Like with FTX, people may never get their funds back, and that's a really awful, awful thing. So all we can really do now is look in hindsight and say, okay, have your funds in different places. Like that's something you can kind of take from that. Do your own research, look at storage options, and yeah, just really, really be careful about exactly where you're putting your stuff. Do your research. Don't get pulled in by unrealistic promises and things like that. And just research and diversify, not just in terms of like the investments you have or whatever, but where you put things as well.
Absolutely.
I'd say that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that, sent reverberations through the industry yet again. The space is not regulated as other, institutions, areas. Finance is obviously a lot more tightly regulated, as you say. You'll have a lot more backups. You'll be able to go to an institution to take your grievances. But unfortunately, the crypto industry, for better for worse, still does not have that regulation. I'm sure more regulation will come in to protect people. But again, it goes back to our point. Well, a lot of what Leon, you were just saying now in terms of being safe, using multiple exchanges, using your digital wallets. Often I'll send a small amount before I send a full amount to make sure it goes to the right person. Things like that are just, a bit of due diligence. And also, everybody has to be aware that the space is still very volatile, crypto in general. So we don't give financial advice, but just be careful out there. I think is where a wise way to be.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yep. Our final angle, one which we probably can almost answer this straight away. Can gaming resurrect the NFT market? OpenSea thinks so. This is a story on TechCrunch, all about how OpenSea sees its future in gaming, or the future of NFTs in gaming. And a lot of what we talk about and a lot of what we've got coming up is gaming, and it's also about NFT utility. So, Leon, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so we have a whole load of things to kind of unpack on this one. I mean, our founders, even like long before either of us kind of joined the company, were writing blog posts on the Virtua blog about NFTs and gaming, and how one of the big issues with games, for instance, is that if you have a game, so for instance, like Modern Warfare 2 now, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is out now. I don't have it yet. I have Call of Duty Vanguard though, and I don't think I can take any of my personal items that I paid for from Vanguard into Modern Warfare 2, for instance. Like if I want the stuff that I paid for, I've got to play the other game. I can't put it into the new one. So that's kind of a big issue, in that when you want to move on to a new game, you can't then take a lot of your items from the previous one and put them into the new one. It's just generally not possible. And you don't have any ownership over those things as well. You can't go and sell them to other people who still want to play the old game. You can't just kind of like have them for like your own kind of enjoyment, just kind of like have like the sentimental value of having them, like say in like a digital wallet, where you can just look through your old digital items from different games and say that, oh, this is really, really cool. I really enjoyed this game or whatever. You can't really get the memories from it. You just kind of like lose it forever, and it's always attached to that one game. Whereas with NFTs and blockchain, you're able to actually have ownership of these things, and you'll be able to move them from game to game as long as those games are compatible. Compatibility and interoperability will be a massive issue for these different things, but maybe standards will eventually evolve. In the same way that we have websites, every website kind of like shares various aspects of its kind of like coding with other sites, and the whole internet kind of like shares like the Internet Protocol suite and things like that, which means you can go to any website, any company's website, and interact with it through one web browser. You don't need a different web browser for every single company. So yeah, I mean that's one of the things that one of the big problems with gaming that NFTs kind of solve for. And we have a game coming out called VFlex Battle for Virtua Prime. I've seen quite a bit of it now, and it really does look really cool. I can't wait to try it out. It's all NFT based, but yeah, gaming works especially well for NFTs. And we've got I don't know how much I can really say about this, because we have. It's a good point actually to shout out VFlex Weekly, a weekly thing that we do on Discord. I think on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. I believe it is. We have a whole load of blog posts about it as well. So if you go to the blog.virtua.com site, every week there's a new blog post about VFlex Weekly with a recording of the audio. So our product manager, a guy called Danny, and our head of community, a guy called Yaka, both go through all the latest VFlex stuff, and they've been talking about the game for a long time. It's really probably the best place to go to like get weekly updates about these things, and also have Discord sessions where they do live streams of within the game. But yeah, we have that, and also the virtual metaverse itself is gamified in a kind of resource management sense at the moment, and also with trading, and we're gonna have resources coming out of land plots. You'll be able to craft new NFTs with land plots. We have land bots, which are our latest drop, which sold out last week. So there's kind of like NFT little bots which you'll be able to plug into your land plots, and then they give you various benefits to kind of maximize the value of your land plot in various ways. And you can use them as PFPs as well. So they have metaverse functionality and also PFP utility as well. So if you go to landbots.virtua.com, then that has a whole load of information about that too. So a lot of what we're doing is like gamified stuff, or it's actually creating games again from scratch. VFlex Battle for Virtua Prime is being created with Stainless Games, who made Carmageddon and the video game version of Magic the Gathering, so they really know what they're doing. They've brought a lot to that project, so it's really cool. So yeah, but I think that this is something which within the NFT market is something which NFTs are really built for. And gaming and NFTs, that kind of crossover has been controversial, largely because of the environment stuff. But again, if they emerge 99% reduction in carbon emissions, like that will improve in the future as well. So I think that the FUD around NFTs and gaming will kind of like dissipate eventually, to the extent that it hasn't already, because people don't always have flexible views, essentially. I think it'll change, and it'll be positive eventually. Yeah.
I think as you say, excuse me, as you say, the gaming industry has been very wary of NFTs, of coming into the space for various reasons. And I think there's a lot of examples of it being done very badly, where games have come into the space looking to make a quick profit. Games that particularly didn't lend themselves to be NFT games have sort of jumped on the bandwagon way too early and not been executed properly. I think what we're looking at in Monster Zone in particular, which is obviously part of the Virtua Prime or the Virtua Metaverse on Virtua Prime, our home planet in the Metaverse, is that it's designed for the space. It is a game metaverse. And I think that's unique in itself. There's a lot of the metaverse which is still being carved out. There's a lot that's still being carved out for NFTs and finding their utility and finding their purpose. Originally NFTs came out and they landed on the scene, and we were talking about some of these huge projects that raised vast sums of money for individual NFTs. But we could be moving into a place where NFTs have less of a significant value for an individual item at point of sale, but through gaming, through utility, through adding to an NFT, it will continue to evolve. It will continue to add value. You think of the example of a perk in Ready Player One or a relic, as we will have in the Monster Zone, that is unique. It has a unique function. It's a very limited range. That gets me excited. Like our founders and like many of the other people in Virtua, my background is in gaming as well, or part of my background. And I'm excited about what the NFTs in gaming can become. And obviously a games metaverse is something else entirely, but it needs to be executed in the right way. I can definitely, as many others can see, is a place for NFTs in games, but it needs to be executed in the right way. And I think part of that will be designing games with NFTs in mind, with the metaverse in mind. And I think that we'll probably see, in conclusion, is a completely unique genre develop rather than kind of an add-on for existing games. We might see something completely new develop within the metaverse that involves NFTs, that kind of thing, which, starting from scratch and has a new audience. And it might not be the traditional gamer. It could be somebody else, just like mobile gaming is not just for hardcore traditional gamers. I was listening to an interview earlier on Crypto Slate with a couple of our guys, and they were talking about how your mum might play Candy Crush, but she doesn't see herself as a gamer. We'll probably see something similar happen in the metaverse.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that intent and execution are really key, and I think that maybe sometimes that's where various projects kind of drop the ball a little bit. Like they kind of have this view, which I think now is kind of like getting a little bit tempered by the market fluctuations and like the bubble popping that we're seeing. There are still projects that have this kind of view of NFTs as basically a cash grab, and that's kind of how they intend it to be. And then they execute it with that intention in mind as well, and it doesn't really work out. And the reason it's going to do that is because it's not really deeper than just saying this is an NFT and that's it. There's kind of like a good NFT meme where there's that scene at the end of The Wolf of Wall Street where Leonardo DiCaprio, as Jordan Belfort, is teaching like a sales class, and he gets this pen and he goes to this guy in the audience, "Oh, sell me this pen." And in the meme, the guy replies, "It's an NFT," and that's just like his sales line. And a lot of people kind of like come into the NFT space with that in mind. They just think, "Oh, we have like a really cool idea and it's going to be an NFT, so it's just going to sell." And that's just not enough anymore. And I think the Landbots especially a really good example of making a real effort. I know that a lot of effort has gone into that because I'm in all the development channels for those things, and I've seen how much work has gone into it. It's an insane amount of work to make things which really have like a lot of utility and will have a lot more utility in the future, and also have PFP functionality and also metaverse functionality and things that are going to evolve over time and look really cool and look really cute. There's been a lot of effort going into that, and I think that that's a really good example to kind of like follow in the sense of how do you actually build a metaverse asset which really does have value in all kinds of different ways and is not just a picture or a video. Something which really has a lot more going for it. It's really important to have that. So the intent and execution really is really key. Like you were saying, that's a good point.
Absolutely. All very exciting. And I think watch this space. So thanks, Leon, for joining us for another episode of Virtua Talks News. Guys, thanks for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much.
All right, cool. See you guys.